Great. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Pearson, CEO of Roccor, joining you from sunny Colorado today. We have a panel, Old Space, New Tricks, we're going to talk about. Where does this kind of come from? The genesis is Roccor is 10 years young now. We've gone through a big transition the last 3 or 4 years. I joined the company about 4 years ago from a technology developer to a real supplier of space hardware. Lucky enough to have done a lot of work with AFRL, starting to do more work now with SMC as we're moving into more of the operational type of missions. And as we've sort of grown up, we've all brought different experiences within Roccor. We've got a lot of people like myself, 20 odd years in the space industry, but we're very much a new space company. So the genesis for this panel for me, I listened into one of the industry days from SMC 2.0. I want to say it was last year. Listened to what the folks had to say, and Joy White's been a big part of changing that over there at SMC 2.0, really driving that change through. And we sort of talked a little bit afterwards, and there's a lot for us to learn from each other. Large organization with lots and lots of experience. But then from the Roccor side, a lot of fresh perspectives, a lot of fresh thinking, a lot of agility. So yeah, out of that, we thought this would be a great panel to get everybody together. Our moderator today is going to be Scott Tibbetts. Scott's a bit of a rock star in the industry. Scott was in New Space before New Space was the thing. I'm sure you'll ever me say all this, Scott. He was the founder and CEO of Starsys, global leader in spacecraft mechanism design with 150 employees, record of 3,000 mechanisms thrown on 300 spacecraft with zero failures. Starsys merged with Space Dev in 2006 and was acquired by SNC in 2008. Scott is the founder and vice chair of the eSpace Center for Space Entrepreneurship, congressionally funded aerospace incubator, supporting the creation and development of entrepreneurial space companies. And we're lucky enough to also have Scott as an executive advisor here as well. Scott's a big part of the team. Probably the key things you need to know about Scott is he's a keyboard player in a garage band, Too Much Fun, known for playing the same 40 classic rock songs in the same order for more than 30 years.
I was telling Joy I probably sang Moni Moni more than 1,000 times. But Chris, thank you very much for this. Quite a pleasure and honor to be doing this, particularly with the people on the panel. I'd like to introduce them. And we'll go around. I'm going to start with Joy. So Joy White, she is the principal assistant to the program executive officer for space acquisition strategies and program execution. She acts with the commander in the execution of an annual budget of $9 billion to deliver and develop capabilities to support the warfighter. And she leads a workforce of approximately 6,000 military and civilian personnel to enable the space warfighting construct and preparing the nation to fight and win a conflict in space. And most importantly, she was in the past in a 4-person working group. Turned out one of the 4, unbeknownst to the group, was an international spy who is now serving decades of time in jail. So welcome, Joy.
An illustrious past.
Yes. I'm going to go to Colonel Felt. We're not going to go to Kurt. Yes, we are. He's the director of the AFRL Space Vehicles Directorate. Personally, AFRL down in Kirtland was responsible for a lot of the programs that made the companies of the people on this, particularly, including Starsys. So he's commander of the Phillips Research Site, director of the Space Vehicles Directorate at Kirtland. He leads military and civilians who comprise the Center of Excellence for Space Technology and Advanced Technology Integration. Commander of Space Test Operations, has been involved in signal intelligence with low LEO spacecraft. And he doesn't speak to this much. I had to go hunting for it, but he has a BS in Electrical Engineering, Computer Science, and History, a master's in Electrical Engineering, Computer Science, PhD in Electrical Engineering, Computer Science. And in 1991, when Duke won the 1921 basketball championship, he was filmed on TV burning benches and yelling wildly and screaming into the TV. So Colonel Felt, welcome. We're tickled pink to have you here.
It's great to be here, but you don't have to bring up all that ancient history from 1991. But fun time.
But I didn't tell them about the Top Gun Award, so we won't tell them about how you were the best in 700 and got the Top Gun
Let's
Award.
skip that.
That would be.
Let's talk about new space.
We'll talk about new space. So Chris McCormick, oh good gosh, Chris and I have known each other for a long time. He's been in aerospace 35 years, and he was in new space again back before it was called new space. It was called faster, better, cheap. Back in the day, and his focus is new mission capabilities, not the spacecraft, but what are we going to do with a mission. He's founder and CEO. He was CEO of Broadreach for 15 years, grew it to 60 people, 28 million in revenues, and then sold it to Moog in 2012. And then he started a company, entrepreneurial space company, which is almost an oxymoron. Company called Planet IQ. He raised quite a bit of venture capital. He has his first launch either happening or happened. And he is, Planet IQ is all about using GPS occultation to be able to do moisture sounding and give us the ability to do 10, 20, 30-day forecasts instead of what we have right now. So he's selling data to the weather services. He is a wooden boat nut. Big boats made out of wood, really out of Key West. And as he says, being an old wooden boat nut is an addiction that's better for you and less costly than a cocaine habit, which, when you're down in Florida is kind of, I guess, the lexicon. You compare everything to cocaine. I'm not quite sure. But anyways, that's Chris McCormick. We'll just leave it at that. Chris Pearson, this is the host for this. Roccor has put this thing together and brought together these, this panel, which is, striking. And Chris is, so he's the CEO of Roccor. He actually started with Airbus and worked on 9 NATO, UK, and US geosatellite spacecraft. He's been deeply involved in the cooperations between UK, NATO, and the US. Then he got involved on the entrepreneurial side with a company called ABSL, bringing lithium-ion batteries to spacecraft. He was the one that created the beachhead in the US for that company, working for 2 years out of his basement. So he had all this practice in what COVID isolation is like back about 20 years ago. And then he sold the company to Enersys in 2011. And then he brought Surrey Space Systems over to the US, established Surrey in the US. Okay, once that was established, he moved on. He was employee number 12 at Roccor and became a US citizen in 2016. When you hear him talk, you probably get a sense he's not from here. He's from over there. And in his past life, he was actually doing medical research that involved finding snails down by the river, capturing them, bleeding them to get their blood for research, and then also something about transporting foreskins for like medical research that had been freshly created. And that's a story over beers for down the road. So that's our panel. And we've got an hour and a lot of
downhill. It was all downhill from there. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, we got to be a little careful. I get a little carried away here. Joyce, I'm going to start with you because I really appreciate what you were talking about. We're going to be talking about making sure we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Legacy space, new space. It isn't just like turn this off and let's go here. It's how we blend. So what's the baby we don't want to throw out? What are the parts of legacy space that we want to make sure we don't let go of as we move forward?
Right. So, well, first of all, I've been at SMC now for 12 years, so I'm hoping I'm not the baby they want to throw out with the bathwater. So we've built some incredible capability that's on orbit and is serving us very, very well. I think the thing that we want to retain is that we've got to have satellites in geo orbit. They provide a capability that we're not going to be able to get by shifting to thousands of satellites in a low Earth orbit. There's just certain capabilities out there. So we have to figure out how to protect those capabilities so they're not, as General Hyten refers to them, big juicy targets that are sitting up there. So that's kind of a different spin on what we need to do with that capability, but we can't throw that out. one of the things we've got to get away from, though, is that capability was all built in a stovepipe, right? So it was really technically challenging capability to put up there when we did it. And then the ground systems are built uniquely for those satellites. And we've got to break away from having that single source data that can't cross to other data sources, right? So integrating all that data is one of the biggest challenges we're having at SMC right now. That's probably our number one objective, is that integrating of the data coming down. But SMC, another piece of the whole, where we're moving from legacy to the future, is we did a transformation, as Chris was talking about. We started about 3 years ago, where we were breaking down those stovepipes, because our organization was actually built like those satellite systems in stovepipes, and the folks didn't really ever cross over. Our GPS folks did all GPS stuff. And when you have that situation, when you need new capability or you want to look at precision navigation and timing, the first answer you'll get from that organization is build another satellite, right? They don't look at any alternative methods of achieving something. And so that kept us from talking to the commercial entities, and it kept us from talking to our international partners. And so breaking down those stovepipes was key to our transformation. And I was telling Scott about the key to our objectives in it were to build an enterprise approach, develop partnerships, and that the partnerships we meant both with industry as well as with those commercial space capabilities that were growing, that are rapidly growing, and we weren't leveraging that. To emphasize innovation, and then to build out a culture at SMC that embraced all of those things, all underpinned by speed. So those, if you caught it, that's epic. So epic speed was kind of our motto, and still is. So that's kind of a first take on that, Scott.
Okay, thanks, Joy. Chris Pearson, you have your first foot firmly in traditional space when you're working with NATO, and then on the other hand, you're deep into new space. So babies in bathwater, what are the things that we should preserve? What are the things we need to give up or move on from?
Yeah, so I guess when I started, I was on a kind of traditional big government project, big cost plus program, very much a kind of top down requirements driven application, multi-year. It was actually a constellation, so there was an awful lot of kind of reliability was absolutely key. It was a big national project, so there was a degree of it having to work. There are some really good things that kind of come along with that. There's a good culture. There's a good culture of success that comes from it. There's obviously the ability to be able to do something at scale, which is amazing. To be quite honest, to be a part of a project like that. I then got lucky enough to be on the complete other end of the spectrum. So not at spacecraft level, but at box level, doing a lot of at the time pretty radical stuff. It wasn't just a new technology. It was also a new approach using kind of commercial tech instead of sort of traditionally developed tech for space. So you saw a very different side of it. And for me, if you can harness both of those things, you can look at what's going out there in the kind of commercial industry, bring that into space, but marry that with all the wisdom, the lessons learned, the experience of old space. That's really the key. So the baby for me is the culture of both of those, and there's no one that's better or worse. They're different risk postures, if you like, for kind of different solutions to problems. But in terms of strengths, there are strengths in both, and it's trying to get away from the dogma. Some of the new space stuff at times, in my opinion, can be a little bit brouhaha, a little bit of vaporware in there, and kind of cutting through that dogma, and then at the same time cutting through the dogma of it's always done in this way on the traditional side. If you can get past those, that's when you really succeed.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Colonel Felt, what's a key lesson that you learned from a failure in your career? Might be space, might be somewhere else. I'm sure you've seen things go very well and things go wrong. What's a lesson you learned when something went wrong?
Of course, anybody who's been in this business has had many failures over the decades, and that's okay. You know, that's part of the risk posture that we try to adapt. If you have never failed, then I would argue you're not doing enough. All right, you need to be a little bolder, a little more leaning forward, a little more willing to make mistakes, and that doesn't mean we're reckless cowboys. We don't want it. We don't want that, but the willingness to take some calculated risk is super important. So one of the hardest lessons learned, I think, from my satellite days on the technical side is just don't shortchange the testing at the end. All right. It's the easiest thing to cut out of the schedule, and it's very expensive. So you always want to cut it out of the budget too. But boy, there's so many times that you learn something surprising and unexpected in the final system test. So you don't want to shortchange that. And I actually think that's one of the things, that's part of the baby that you do not want to throw out with the old space, new space thing, because that really is what gets us to having the capability in the end. I mean, I guess the way I view the difference between old space and new space, it's kind of like that saying, make new friends, but keep the old, one silver and the other gold. All right, we need them both. The way I think of new space is, the government for 70 years was like in the driver's seat telling us where we're going to go in space. And that led to a very slow, deliberate approach that delivered awesome capabilities in the end. What we have with new space is now we're not in the driver's seat anymore. All right. Commercial opportunities are in the driver's seat here, and they are going, most of these companies are commercial driven, going where they need to go to make money, which is exactly wonderful. But what we have to do on the government side is figure out, okay, how are we going to use that to help us as well? And what is the military utility of these things, and how can we build out this hybrid architecture that's some old and some new, so that we can get what we want? But both of them need to make sure they don't shortchange the end testing. I don't know, that could have been a lesson learned 70 years ago, but somehow it's a lesson never learned.
Yeah, it reminds the old space version of that is Hubble. And we don't need to do that final test. What could possibly go wrong? Chris McCormick, you've been known for being a believer in Six Sigma, the whole idea that reliability has to be put into a spacecraft. And the only way to do that is analysis, analysis, analysis. Doesn't have a 1 in a million chance of working. It shouldn't be flown. Could you just speak into that philosophy a little more?
Wow, you're really piquing me. I'll start off that the Moni thing. I actually saw Tommy James and the Shondells at my high school during his trying to rebound, getting out of all the drug problems he was having. I guess he should have done the wooden boats instead of the cocaine. I don't know. About on the failure side, I actually started in the space industry with space applications at DARPA. Mike Fields was the director then, and he made some statements about failure and risk, success, and making progress. And he basically told all the young engineers and folks that were coming on board that you're going to be helping specify, manage, fly a lot of these different technologies. And if you are succeeding more than 70% of the time, you're not taking enough risk. And if you're failing more than 30% of the time, you're being stupid. So he pushed that out. It's like, hey, we're DARPA, we're supposed to take risk. AFRL is kind of like the next level down. They'll take risk, but not in that kind of a risk posture. 50-50 is not good enough for them. So it's one of those things, how do you think in actually getting things done at starting at a mission level, and then what are the components or mission design to actually accomplish things? So we were always mission focused. It's like, what are you trying to do? The science per dollar, the mission returns per dollar, but then put that in the time domain. And that was kind of my complaint about the analysis paralysis that people would say, especially with the Aerospace Corporation. I talked to some of my Aerospace Corporation friends about updating the TRL, the technology readiness level. You need to put a time domain on that. because there's too many colonels and brigadiers are telling their majors who are telling their lieutenants that, oh, I'm only accept anything at TRL 6 or above, but you're not launching for another 4 years. Like, no, look at all the technologies that are in development that could be done in 6 months, that you could jump 2 or 3 levels to actually make your mission less risky and much more on the science return. You always start, to me, with a clean sheet of paper, and then it's, okay, what are we trying to get done? And what Joy had kind of mentioned, hey, let's don't stovepipe this stuff. You know, why would you? It's, hey, I want better weather information. I don't need to build a weather satellite. It just happens that we're doing that because we think we could get the better information that way. Same thing with at the spacecraft level. Hey, I need quaternions. I don't necessarily need a star tracker. You have to keep on looking at that over and over and over again. What is this particular mission? So,
Hey, Chris,
I'm not a big analysis person, but that's, I think, a problem with new space and old space. Sometimes the new space was not heeding to F equals MA and E equals IR, and not really heeding to, hey, frequency allocation to get your data down. So don't ignore regulations. That's old space, new space. That's, you do everything.
so Chris, you mentioned something interesting about failure rate. When you're back doing DARPA and DARPA hard, 70% was what you're trying to do. It's interesting as we look at this panel. By the time you get to Joy, well, 70% doesn't work. And so, Colonel Felt, Joy, what would you speak to new space in terms of a failure? What's your tolerance for failure? Joy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think that's when we talk, I was really resonating with what Chris was saying. One of the frustrating things to me that we really need to examine from an SMC perspective, I'd say AFRL as well, is that both our acquisition processes and our space processes have risk aversion built into them. So you don't even see how risk averse you're being because it's just a part of the process. So how do we identify those areas where, the TRL levels, what some of the specs that we've lived by for 30 years just have risk aversion built into them. And I think that the way to get to that obviously is to tolerate failure. And that's a challenge because, of course, for us, we've got a lot of folks to answer to when we have a failure, whether it's within DoD, over on the Hill. But so we are working on getting even our stakeholders to understand that we are going to have failures. And, the former Secretary of the Air Force said she wanted to give a cake to the first team that had a failure program, right? So, but changing that culture is really hard. I mean, I'm seeing that, I'm living it, trying to get folks to understand it's okay to fail. And then to Chris's point, is it 70% success, 30% failure? What is that? We have to break away from the 100% success goal that I think we've had. And actually, Chris also talked about he enjoyed being on a government program because it was a no-fail must-do. We still have those, right? But the more that we can take risks with commercial entities, looking at different innovative concepts before we jump into a big honking program, I think the better off we are.
So that's a good acronym we all should be using, BHP. So big honking program. I just want us all to put that into the lexicon and know that you heard it first here from Joy. BHP.
I love it.
Okay, Colonel Felt, reliability. I know you're kind of across the spectrum from this is okay to fail, but not this one.
Hey, Scott, I don't have any BHPs out at AFRL because my budget is 2% of Ms. White's. But what that means is that I should be able to take some more risk, and I think we do, and I think that's healthy. But what I want us to think about is that there's such a thing as schedule failure too. You're talking about technical failure, but in the government, we're not very good at understanding that, if your competitor out innovates you and beats you to market in the market of national security, that is schedule failure, and that is at least as bad as technical failure. And so that's where I think we have something to learn from the new space companies, where when you're market driven, if you don't not first to market and your competitor gets to market first, you lose huge amounts of revenue. So that's a natural reward mechanism to emphasize schedule. In the government, we don't have that natural reward mechanism. And what I think we need to do is create some ways to, if you will, simulate the crucible of combat, because of course we don't want to really have a war in space where you could determine the winners and losers. But instead, what we want to do is have simulated war games and things like that, where you can show that having things sooner is more important than small technical failures along the way. So that's what I've tried to emphasize, is just the importance of maintaining the schedule, not just the technical discipline. One of the CubeSats I just launched, by the way, the team, right before we were at the launch readiness review, and we reviewed all this stuff, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of risk in this thing, isn't there? And they were like, yeah, well, we got a 50-50 chance this thing's going to work, but this is the only chance to launch this within the next 2 years. And so I was like, well, let's go for it, So I do think we have to factor that time element of things into it. I was uncomfortable with 50-50 chance of failure, I got to tell you. But at the same time, we knew we had to get that thing up there and try to get it to work. So I think the time element is really important here.
Thank you. That's a great point. And which leads to a question for Chris Pearson. So you live, eat, and breathe that, because you've got a company that has 10, 20 programs. They're all new space. They all could potentially have risk, and you've got to deliver them on time, or people no longer, that's what Roccor does. It delivers on time. So how do you balance, it's like you've got technical risk, you've got schedule risk, you're a commercial company that has to make money. How do you pull that off?
That's a really tough question. So there's no recipe. Each program is really different. Each customer is really different. So I'll maybe answer that in a different way. So I mentioned at the start of this, the company's kind of grown from a technology development firm to a real provider. And what that means is, we did a lot of ground demonstrations in the early days. We got the opportunity to launch on a couple of technology demonstration missions, and that builds a kind of credibility. The heritage smeritage that Chris loves to talk about. That's still in the industry. The chicken and egg of you don't fly unless you've flown before. It's a really tough cycle to break. Now, as you kind of get through that, and you then migrate to being more of a product company as opposed to just a technology development firm, you're starting to provide products and solutions. And each time, as we've grown up the ladder, I'll call it, with larger programs, bigger customers, they've all had a different risk posture. We've had commercial customers that are prepared to take more risk. For them, schedule is absolutely number one. They've got a business case. They've got to generate revenue by date X, and if they don't hit that date, the company's probably not going to survive. Then we have other customers where we're moving up, and it's all about performance. It's all about performance, even before reliability. They're trying to enable capability for a few years down the road. So going back to your question of how you make it work, I think it's not having a recipe. It's all about understanding your customer, having processes, having people that can, tailor their approach. That's programmatic. It's risk. Do we go for a whiz-band technology, or do we go for something that's a little bit heavier but is going to do the job? Understanding where that risk posture actually lies, and having an open dialogue with the customer. It's all about expectations and success, together. So yeah, there is no hard and fast rule apart from talk to your customer and understand. That's the way I think we've been successful.
Okay, thanks. Something I think we have about 150 people watching, is that if you can send in questions, there's a place there for you to send in questions. We're going to bring those into the conversation. We're going to focus more on a Q&A from the audience. So I encourage that. We'll just start feathering that into what we're doing. Okay, so Chris McCormick, you're now with Planet IQ. You aren't doing 30 things at once. You're doing one thing. And talk about schedule and how important that is to you. I'm guessing that if a program slips for 6 months, it's not just, we'll just wait, but it needs to happen on time. What's your relationship to schedule risk?
Yeah, I'm not doing 30 things at one time, so this is a little bit different for me.
Yeah.
The schedule, there's two things that are big, different that this time than last time. Is that one, we're venture funded, so we have venture board, board of directors. I'm on the board of directors too. So that's a little bit different than I had before versus all sweat equity and employee owned and let's go make things happen and more of a team. Now we actually do have investors that are looking at and hired us because we're the pros from Dover, so to speak, that hey, these guys know how to do this and they'll make this happen. So we do get a little leeway on some time, but we do have schedules. And back with government type contracting, big differences, everything is fixed price. There's some incentive clauses for subcontractors and for us and everybody else, but it's fixed price, fixed schedules, as much as you can make them fixed. You know, certainly when you're in a development job, you can't schedule your problems. So you try to put in some kind of contingency margins, both money and time. But you try to work that both from a risk posture of what things you have to develop and how hard it is, and use a lot of engineering judgment for that. But still, we've been at the pad since March at Cape Canaveral, and we still haven't launched since one was because of COVID-19, the primary payload from Argentina, and the Argentines couldn't make it up because they shut down all air travel to fuel their spacecraft, battery charges and checkout and stuff. So they finally made it last month. Then we had to wait for the SmallSat to get off our pad. And then they were a week late, which pushed us a week late, which pushed us into the NRO schedule that we couldn't fly kind of near them. So now we're still at the pad and maybe August 27th, although we've been physically there since March. So in the meantime, you know, we have these contracts, give data and pay on delivery. So we've lost 6 months of revenue, which is painful.
Yeah.
So you live that versus on a cost plus job, it's like, oh, well, maybe we'll get it done this decade, you know, kind of thing. So there's no huge time aspect of it from a company survival perspective because you're on a cost plus job.
Yeah. So this kind of ties to Colonel Felt's comment about how do we get rid of technical risk. Now you've got a survival issue that has you focused on, I'm sorry, not technical schedule risk. You've got a survival issue that keeps you focused. Colonel Felt's looking for what's a reward we can provide. You know, kind of, you got a carrot and a stick.
Yeah, you could have a fixed price job with incentives. This same, say, hey, you know, finish this task by this date, and you get paid whatever negotiated thing was.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're a month early, you get another 3% or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you incentivize for early. You don't really. It's more the carrot, not the stick. The stick is still there because when you're late, you're losing money now. So you have the time domain in your frontal lobe all the time managing. To buy down technical risk is generally you get the smartest people you could get and the best tools you could get. Doesn't necessarily have to be the most expensive tools, but to work on it. But I'd much rather have heritage between the ears than heritage components.
Yep, understand.
Because there that's not in the book.
It's an interesting phrase, heritage between the ears.
Well, if you want a new Star Tracker, you'd rather have somebody who's designed 4 different generations of Star Trackers because he knows what to stay away from.
Yeah.
But you insist that he started with a clean sheet of paper. Don't bring anything forward except physics.
Yeah.
Because here's a new focal plane array. Here's some new optics that we've never used before.
Yep.
Put that in your trade space.
Hey, Chris Pearson, from one of our earlier conversations, you talked about this epiphany from a failure. There was like I get it. We got to do this different. Can you speak to that? That was back in the days of faster, better, cheaper.
Yeah. So I guess I approached that question a little bit differently. So, I approached it more from trying to start a space startup. And I'd say with ABSL, I learned a lot. I was still really an engineer. I certainly hadn't ever managed a business before, and I was making it up as I went along. Probably the biggest thing that kind of held me back, and a lesson that I think is stood us in good stead, the latest stuff, especially at Roccor, is it's all about the people. It's all about talent. And when you are up against it, you're trying to grow, you're trying to scale. That temptation to hire fast and not hire right is one you really have to avoid. You really have to wait. So there's a migration or a change, sorry, that kind of happens as you go along. It's always about the right people. It's always about having the right talent in there. But in the early days, when you literally are the garage operation, which is fun in a lot of ways, but it's crazy hard work. And some people just do not work well in jobs that aren't black and white defined. That's fine. Some people don't like to wear lots of different hats. So if you can get those right people on the bus at the beginning that really are able to adapt, who love to learn, who love to fill in the gaps, that's the first stage. And then as you get bigger after that, it's then putting those people in the right seats. Once it becomes obvious what the seats even are, because you don't know at the start, you're pivoting every 20 minutes. But once you realize what those right seats are, and you can really get folks that are in a position where they can perform at their best and give you their best ROI, it's just phenomenal. So yeah, keeping that eye on hiring right and not hiring fast is that was a big lesson that I learned. It takes a lot of time. When you get a bad fit in there, it just holds you back and slows everything down. I'd rather work twice as hard with half the folks. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you're bringing up. Fuzzy logic or working in the gray. It's not black and white. It's not ones and zeros. It's like, how do we, like Chris is saying, heritage between the ears. I'm just going to highlight that piece since we're getting some other questions here. The idea of, I'm guessing all of you would say, yeah, it's not black and white. It's like, okay, what do we do in this situation? How do we take our experience and make a decision in a gray trade space or fuzzy logic trade space? So we've got some great questions that are coming from those that are listening. So, question for actually directly to Chris Pearson. How do you manage clients' expectations, timetables, product results, while retaining culture? Roccor is a pretty special place to work. How do you retain that with expectations from customers?
It's being open. It's being open about the issues. Establishing a layer of a manner of communication that's going to allow you to do that. Again, going back 15 years ago, running delivery kind of projects. I think Colonel Felt used the phrase, it's very top down. The spec is pretty rigid. There are scope changes that used to happen, but pretty much it's all baked in. By the time you get to that level, there's not a lot that's going to change. What you're delivering against. The issues that come up are kind of very much as a result of any problems you have within your project team. That was my experience then. The art of being successful now, in my opinion, is not having a rigid spec, and that is scary. That is really scary. Scary for the customer. It's also scary for you as well. And quite often, the contract changes aren't always up to date with the version of the spec you've got, because you've all got a timeline. If you don't deliver, if you don't launch by a particular time, from our point of view, we don't get our product to market. So that ability to be able to work in that way comes down to the people again. It comes down to trust. You don't just start from day one being able to do that. The good thing about the space industry is it's still a very small group of folks. So it's kind of rare, very rare actually, that we start a new project without having some sort of battle scars that we've kind of formed on the projects before.
Yeah.
That really helps. But
and I'm sure
as to kind of how we've been successful, Scott, it's people. It's I think Chris McCormick uses this phrase. It's a trust sale when you work together.
Yes, absolutely.
you're going to be in the trenches. How are you going to perform together?
Yeah. That phrase, "it's the people," is, kind of overused. It's my team. It wasn't me, it was the team. But I mean, the point you're making is that it has to be like in the DNA. There needs to be a hologram of how we work in this space that carries through the people. And I know that's true because I've been close to both Chris's companies. Joy, I'm going to come over to you on a different topic. And I just want to tell the audience, we're shifting 2 questions from the audience. So that's where these are coming from. Joy, somebody's asking, what are the future opportunities for collaboration between private companies and government? We were talking about that with SpaceX. What do you see coming? We've seen them now. What do you see in the future? And Colonel Feld, I'll ask you the same question.
Right. So, yeah, the SpaceX reference is interesting because they fought for years to get engaged with the government, and it took us time to come around to it. And part of it was that risk aversion that we've been talking about. We're flipping the script on that. We currently have the Space Enterprise Consortium out there, which just today I just learned has over 400 companies in it, and that's a really quick way for us to get new capability, prototyping, that kind of work done. But the other thing we're doing, and actually Chris Pearson brought this up to me at the industry day last year, was how do we get ideas in from industry? Spec is still, we put out a request for white papers on certain ideas and have folks bid on it via spec. But we're just starting out a new, and I'm drawing a blank on what we're calling it, because I'm literally just started 2 weeks ago, but we're going to start doing requests for industry to give us just conceptual ideas that they have for space. So we'll pick kind of a general broad area and then go out and say, what are your ideas on this? We used to do that when I was at Missile Defense Agency years ago. We did the same kind of thing. We're letting industry tell us what kinds of capability they're thinking about, so that then we can craft what we really want to do to partner with industry and use that capability as well. So we're just starting that out, and I apologize that I can't recall the name, but it's coming out of our development core, and they'll be publishing that broadly to get ideas in.
Yep. So Colonel Felt, same question.
Well, within AFRL, we do have, just about a year ago, we did come out with an open announcement called STAR, which is exactly what Ms. White was getting at, where we're trying to be open to collecting ideas. But, I'm actually more interested, that's to get ideas that might get government funding. But, I'm particularly interested in looking at what is commercially successful and then how the government can leverage what's commercially successful. And I think launch is a great example. SpaceX has lowered the cost to launch by a factor of 10 by some calculations. And that is just that lowered barrier of entry has opened up all kinds of new things that we can do in space now that we couldn't do before. And now, for example, the proliferated LEO constellations, totally unaffordable under the old paradigm. And now look at all the companies that are building them, and that there is a good market indications that some of those will be successful. Now, on the launch side of things, we've got 137 launch startups now. Probably 137 are going to survive. Some are.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing here. And so whatever is successful in the commercial market, what my goal is to go figure out how militarily useful that is. And if there's an opportunity to shape that capability in a little way that makes it more militarily useful, that's what I'm trying to do. Small satellites and these proliferated LEO constellations, I do think that's the next big market, that something is going to shake out there and something is going to be successful. And some of those are going to be really militarily useful to us. So we have to figure out how to best engage with those companies and how to use those capabilities in these kind of hybrid architectures that we're talking about. And then if you get into the satellite, all the components in the satellite have opportunities for innovation. And really, what we've seen is where modern technologies have gotten to the point where we can make small sats act like big sats. And that's a really powerful scaling model. So I'm kind of excited about the Space Commodities Exchange. We've talked about that a little bit, but the idea is that if you do get to the volumes that we're talking about of spacecraft launches every Friday and things like that, then you can envision a commodities market that's like the Chicago Board of Trade or something, where you can buy and sell things at very efficient prices and use all the market mechanisms that are out there to help make the market even more efficient and more innovative with known value functions, known barriers to entry and that are low, and fixed and established quality standards. Those are all super attractive. So looking way out to the future, that I envisioned something like that for space. I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to our lightning round now, and what that means is we have 10 minutes left. We have a few questions, so you're only going to have 60 seconds to answer a question. I'm probably not going to answer the same question. When I go like this, that means your 60 seconds are up. So this is your opportunity to look at your internal clocks. So we're going to start off, and I'm going to go to Chris Pearson. People talk about failures. What is failure? Is it the spacecraft not working and not getting to space? Is it the mission not being successful or not being able to get the data? What do you consider failure? What is failure?
So I think I'm going to sound like a record here, but I think the failure if you've miscalibrated what it is you're trying to do, and you've not properly done your risk management. So if you have a flight failure and there's no budget left over, there's no launch opportunities for another couple of years because of the fact you designed your spacecraft to not be launch vehicle agnostic, those kind of things. You've got to get that right at the start. Any failure, come back to what Chris said, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to move ahead. If you failed and you failed smart and you can learn something from it. So it's a technology that's failed in orbit, but you've got enough instrumentation there to be able to diagnose it, move on and improve for the next thing.
Okay, thank you.
Be failed smart.
Chris McCormick, satellite insurance, mission insurance. What's out there? Are you using it? Are you insuring your data getting down?
I'll be quick. Yes, we're insuring the launch plus 1 year, and it does have a little bit of data content, not really our customer insurance, but we do have launch and spacecraft in 1 year, although the spacecraft is designed for 7. So we did buy insurance. Insurance gone up a lot because of the Vega loss last year. They're finally flying another one here pretty soon. But all that was insured, but the insurance rates went up. The one quick thing about insurance that people don't know, especially for the commercial GEO, they're so conservative that even if you have a new product that is totally free to Boeing or Lockheed or Airbus, they can't fly it because the underwriters won't insure it. And then the customers won't buy it unless it's insurable. And then they're kind of caught in the heritage stuff. So you really have to look at the commercial insurance stuff holistically at a mission level. Do you even care? Do you want to afford it or not?
Okay, thank you. Colonel Fell, there are some pretty radical ideas out there for how commercial companies work. Crowdsourcing, getting hobbyists involved, looking for some out-of-the-box things from not the usual places. I know that DARPA's done that. Some of the other agencies have gotten out of the box. Are you doing what have you, or are you doing anything along those lines?
Yeah, love those ideas, the accelerators, the crowdsourcing, all of that. The mantra that comes to mind is trust but verify. All right, first of all, if you don't know the origins of something, you have to be extra careful to verify that it's going to work as expected. And then that's one of the values of diversity in the hybrid architecture, because if you have one part that doesn't work as expected, you've got 9 backups over here. So I see that a lot with these companies that are going out to cislunar space, by the way, which is another great future opportunity for commerce, et cetera. But lots of collaboration, lots of teamwork, and lots of unexpected business arrangements, as you call them.
All right, thank you. Joy, we got a question specifically for you. All of a sudden, the cost of space is going way down. It means anybody can launch something. That's great commercially, but does that create issues with national security that, everybody can get to space and it might be U.S. companies?
So yes, it does to a degree. I mean, we track everything that's in space, right? So the congestion is something that's really a big issue for us to track. The other piece is we're currently in this debate with the spectrum that one company is planning to use that is going to put GPS at risk, right? So those kinds of things, when you have a satellite constellation that relies on a certain spectrum and it's a very, very weak signal, you need to have some kind of controls over what's going on in the commercial space. Now, I think they're letting the FAA kind of run and the FCC take care of monitoring that, but it is something that we need to watch. And on the other one that I was talking about before, it's called Space Vision 2030, and we're doing it through the SPEC consortium. So just for people's information. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Chris Pearson, how do you foresee NASA's going to be changing the risk tolerance of their major programs in the coming years, or do you see that it's set in stone and the major programs aren't going to pivot this direction?
No, it's a mix. It's a mix. So, the move towards trying to use commercial resources or commercial exploitation for LEO, you're going to see more and more of that. Some way LEO buses are already a little bit of a commodity. I think you're going to see more of that. That's going to allow them to do more on the science side. So I think the risk posture is going to be moving in the same direction there. But what NASA's trying to pivot to is obviously the higher value stuff, human space, lunar exploration, onto Mars, et cetera. And at the end of the day, you've got a human in the loop there. There's going to be a certain level of risk tolerance that's just not going to change. To me, it's the right thing for the right missions again.
Understand. Chris McCormick, you were here back in the days of Dan Golden and Faster, Better, Cheaper. You can argue that was one of the first sort of threads of New Space. Is Faster, Better, Cheaper New Space just rebranded, or was that something different?
Well, I think that was NASA's and Golden's idea that a lot of us actually were trying to do that even in the Missile Defense Agency too. It's like we're trying to be fast, and here's a contract start to orbit in 11 months. And what can you do? And so it's the requirements that kind of change. But on the Faster, Better, Cheaper missions that I was on, even the Mars 98, it wasn't necessarily. Some ways it wasn't better, and in some ways it wasn't cheaper. But do you want to go slower? Do you want to be more expensive? And do you want to be not as good? So I mean, it's like, of course you want to be faster, better, cheaper. Mars 98 actually failed because two people did two separately different stupid things, and then they didn't really advertise that to the community to find out why we missed navigation and why we didn't test a Hall effect sensor for a glitch instead of a hard close. So it's like, why didn't you test this? Back with what the Colonel Bell was saying, he said you need to test, you need to verify as close as you can in reality, and there's no reason why you can't do that fast. So it's, people say, well, these things failed, and so Faster, Better, Cheaper failed. No, people do some stupid things, just like Mars Observer. You're trying to take a geo bus that has a lot of heritage and you fly it to Mars to make it, but it's in a different environment and you didn't go do the system engineering to see if it's going to see things differently and what to test and change. So no, Faster, Better, Cheaper works as long as you're smart about it, just about anything else. Heritage systems fail too, because generally somebody does something stupid.
Okay, thank you. We're going to wrap up in just a couple of minutes, so I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and you get one sentence to answer it. You can have as many commas as you want, kind of like Hemingway, but you only get one sentence. Okay, so it's 5 years from now, and we happen to all be sitting around having beers, and we're looking back. We're a little more wizened. There's more heritage between our ears. We're looking back 5 years, and we're saying, who would have thought that was the key to new space succeeding. What are you saying 5 years from now when you look back and say that was the key to new space succeeding? And Colonel Feld, I'm not going to start with you. I'm going to start with Chris Pearson because he looks reflective.
I was trying to work out I'm going to do this without any full stops or periods, as you say. I think it could be the economic downturn and actually Brexit.
Yep.
I'm really intrigued by the international pitch day that we're trying to get going. I'm really loving the fact the US and the UK are trying to develop and make the most of each of the space capabilities. But you know what? I don't think that would have happened without the downturn and also without Brexit.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Okay, Colonel Felt, your sentence.
Who would have thought Amazon and SpaceX merged into AmazeX with their headquarters on the South Pole of the moon and they're mining water?
You should be doing improv. That was great. Okay, Joy.
I'm reflecting on Chris Pearson's comments earlier. It's going to be, we got people that think differently. That's what we got. That's it.
Okay, Chris, M.
Yeah, I'm the Colonel scares me. I don't know about Bezos and Musk together or apart somehow. That's just scary. No, I'm always been mission focused from the beginning. So I think most, how do we keep mission focused and how do we get the collective intellectual content together to actually to work this? This is one of those things that, hey, what do you want to do? Start from a clean sheet of paper. And why does space, in all its uniqueness, why is space the place to go to actually accomplish some goodness science, some mission, some commercial endeavor? Why are we going to space to begin with at the mission level, and then how do you really accomplish it? Whether it ends up being some cislunar or putting a radio telescope on the backside of the moon. There's a lot of good reasons for it. And let's go fund it. The best thing, I think, we're in an industry that we get to create knowledge. We don't just put it on the Google servers and have other people get the knowledge that we create. We create it. So it's very ennobling, and I so hope smart physicists and aerospace engineers and good managers, fiscal managers come into this industry, because we have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah.
I'm very jazzed about it still.
Yeah.
That was not one sentence, Chris.
No, I mean, Chris and I talked early on, and we need to
I was using semicolons.
All right. Well, to the point of making sure we meet schedules we've committed to, we're just a couple minutes over. I would just like to point out something that I really appreciated, and you probably have if you've been watching. It's the personality and the countenance of the people here. These are not necessary. These are all accomplished, highly accomplished, but you can see a willingness to have fun, go with the jokes. It's like, what a fun group of people to go out and have a beer or a glass of wine with. I just have really appreciate getting to know each of you and being able to sit back and listen. So thank you very much. Chris, you're the guy that put this whole thing together. You invested mightily in being able to share knowledge. How about a final word for everybody that's listening? Chris Pearson.
Yeah, it's just the same thing. I thought it was excellent. I really appreciate your time. Yeah. We've got some great thought leaders here, and I really appreciate you taking time. I know we're all very, very busy at the moment. So good stuff. Thank you. Good discussion.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.